You have been surrendering control your entire life, and you never even noticed the trap. Every time you tried to explain yourself to someone who was twisting your words, you handed them the steering wheel of the conversation. Every time you defended your intentions to someone determined to misinterpret them, you gave them leverage over your mind. Every time you reacted emotionally to subtle pressure, guilt, or provocation, you stepped directly into a game that was designed long before you arrived. This is the silent war most men never realize they are fighting. Manipulation does not begin with shouting or threats. It begins quietly. It begins with small psychological hooks that slip into your mind without resistance. A raised eyebrow meant to make you doubt yourself. A carefully chosen question meant to make you justify your actions. A subtle criticism disguised as concern. And before you know it, you are defending yourself in a courtroom you never agreed to enter. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He studied princes, diplomats, conspirators, and enemies of the state. He watched how power was stolen not through open combat, but through subtle psychological influence. He saw that the most dangerous manipulation is the one you do not notice until it has already shaped your decisions. But he also discovered something far more powerful. The strongest leaders never fight manipulation after it happens. They destroy it before it begins. Because once manipulation has started, the manipulator already has one advantage: your attention. And attention is the doorway through which influence enters. Powerful people guard that doorway like a fortress. Niccolò Machiavelli wrote about rulers who lost entire kingdoms, not because they were weak, but because they were predictable. They reacted to pressure. They explained their choices. They allowed enemies to steer conversations and frame situations. And the moment you allow someone to frame the situation, you are already standing on their battlefield. The powerful man never accepts the battlefield chosen by others. He moves the fight before it even begins. Most people think manipulation works through intelligence. They imagine manipulators as clever strategists, whispering psychological tricks. But Machiavelli observed something much simpler. Manipulation works through emotional reflex. The manipulator does not control you by force. He controls you by triggering predictable reactions: guilt, anger, the desire to defend yourself, the need to prove you are right. Once he activates those emotions, you begin playing his game automatically. And the tragedy is that most men believe they are defending themselves while they are actually tightening the manipulator's grip. Think about how easily this happens. Someone questions your competence. Instantly, you feel the urge to prove them wrong. Someone accuses you of being selfish. Instantly, you begin explaining your intentions. Someone subtly implies you are weak. Instantly, your pride rises, and you try to demonstrate strength. Each reaction feels natural. Each reaction feels justified. But every reaction also means the manipulator has succeeded. Because the moment you start reacting, you are no longer in control. Machiavelli's philosophy of power was brutally simple. Control the frame, or you will be controlled by it. The frame is the invisible structure around a conversation or situation. It determines who is defending and who is judging, who is reacting and who is observing, who is powerful and who is seeking approval. Manipulators are masters of framing. They position themselves as the authority. They position you as the one who must explain, justify, or defend. Once that dynamic is established, they no longer need to argue. You will do the work for them. The powerful man refuses this dynamic entirely. He never steps into the frame that others create. If someone tries to make him defend himself, he does not defend. If someone tries to provoke him, he does not react. If someone tries to pressure him emotionally, he does not absorb the pressure. He simply steps outside the entire game. And the manipulator suddenly finds himself alone on a battlefield with no opponent. This is the first principle of Machiavellian defense. Manipulation cannot survive without participation. The moment you refuse to participate, the manipulator loses oxygen. But refusing to participate requires something most men lack: psychological distance. The average man experiences every social interaction as personal. If someone criticizes him, he feels attacked. If someone questions him, he feels challenged. If someone disapproves of him, he feels diminished. These reactions are exactly what manipulators depend on, because when you take everything personally, you become emotionally predictable. And predictability is the easiest weakness to exploit. Powerful people operate differently. They observe before they react. When someone attempts manipulation, they do not immediately defend themselves. They step back mentally and analyze the situation like a chessboard. What is this person trying to achieve? Why are they asking this question? What reaction are they hoping to trigger? The moment you begin asking these questions, something remarkable happens. The emotional spell breaks. Manipulation depends on speed. It depends on immediate reaction. It depends on you responding before you have time to think. But the moment you slow the interaction down, the manipulator loses momentum. This is why Machiavelli admired rulers who possessed composure above all else. A composed man is extremely difficult to manipulate. When pressure appears, he does not rush to respond. When accusations appear, he does not rush to explain. When conflict appears, he does not rush to fight. He watches, he studies, he waits. And in that waiting, the manipulator begins to reveal himself. Because manipulators rely on hidden intentions. They depend on ambiguity and confusion. But when you remain calm and observant, their tactics become obvious. The guilt trips, the emotional traps, the attempts to control the narrative. Suddenly, you see them all. And once you see manipulation clearly, it becomes almost powerless. The fox sees the trap before stepping into it. Machiavelli used the fox and the lion as symbols of leadership for a reason. The lion is strength, the ability to crush enemies openly. But the fox is awareness, the ability to recognize traps before they close. Most men try to fight manipulation with force. They argue. They defend themselves aggressively. They confront the manipulator directly. But by the time you are fighting manipulation, you have already allowed it to start. The fox never fights the trap. The fox avoids it entirely. This is the mindset of powerful people. They are not constantly battling manipulators because manipulators rarely succeed against them in the first place. Their emotional control, awareness, and psychological distance make them extremely difficult targets. Manipulators search for easy prey. They look for people who are eager to prove themselves, people who crave approval, people who react quickly to criticism, people who cannot tolerate being misunderstood. But when a manipulator encounters someone calm, detached, and unwilling to react emotionally, the strategy collapses. Because the manipulator suddenly faces a terrifying problem. He cannot control the outcome, and manipulators hate uncertainty. The powerful man becomes unpredictable precisely because he refuses to play emotional games. When accused, he does not defend immediately. When pressured, he does not submit immediately. When provoked, he does not explode immediately. Instead, he does something far more dangerous. He pauses. That pause is where manipulation dies. Because in that pause, the manipulator realizes something unsettling. This man cannot be moved. And when a man cannot be moved emotionally, he becomes extremely difficult to control. This is the first step toward Machiavellian immunity. You stop reacting automatically. You begin observing strategically. And from that moment forward, manipulation begins to lose its power over you. But awareness alone is not enough. Because the most skilled manipulators are patient. They do not attack directly. They infiltrate your mind slowly through trust, familiarity, and subtle influence, which is why the next lesson Machiavelli teaches is far more ruthless. Powerful people do not just avoid manipulation, they recognize manipulators long before anyone else does. Most men believe manipulators reveal themselves through obvious cruelty. They imagine villains who lie openly, threaten directly, and dominate loudly. But Machiavelli knew something far more unsettling. The most dangerous manipulators rarely appear dangerous at all. They appear reasonable, they appear friendly, they appear concerned. The snake never announces itself before it strikes. It blends into the grass and waits for the careless step. Manipulators operate the same way. They enter your life quietly, through charm, shared opinions, or helpful advice. They listen carefully. They observe your habits, your insecurities, your ambitions. They study the emotional buttons that move you, and then, slowly, they begin pressing those buttons. A subtle remark that makes you question yourself, a compliment that places you slightly beneath them, a favor that creates invisible debt, a question designed to lead you into defending your choices. Each move is small enough to appear harmless, but together they form a web. Machiavelli observed this pattern constantly among courtiers and political rivals in Florence. Influence was rarely achieved through open force. It was achieved through slow psychological positioning. The manipulator positions himself above you, not physically, mentally. He becomes the one who judges while you become the one who explains. He becomes the one who questions while you become the one who justifies. He becomes the one who approves while you become the one who seeks approval. Once that hierarchy is established, the manipulation becomes effortless. You begin policing yourself without realizing it. You adjust your behavior to avoid their disapproval. You soften your opinions to avoid conflict. You try harder to earn their respect. And in doing so, you unknowingly hand them authority over your mind. Powerful people recognize this shift instantly. They notice when someone attempts to claim psychological authority over them. The moment someone begins positioning themselves as the evaluator of your worth, the dynamic becomes dangerous. Because manipulation thrives in unequal psychological relationships, the manipulator must appear higher, you must appear lower. This is why Machiavelli warned princes to control perception all times. A ruler who allowed others to judge him publicly weakened his authority before he even made a decision. The same principle applies in everyday life. The powerful man refuses to place himself beneath anyone psychologically. If someone questions him with hidden judgment, he does not rush to defend himself. He calmly redirects the frame. Sometimes this means answering a question with a question. Sometimes it means giving a short response with no explanation. Sometimes it means saying nothing at all. Silence again becomes the most disruptive weapon. Because manipulators rely on engagement. They want you talking. They want you explaining. They want you emotionally invested in the conversation. Once you become invested, they begin steering the interaction. But when you respond with calm brevity, something strange happens. The manipulator loses control of the direction. Imagine a person attempting to provoke you with subtle criticism. They say something like, "Are you sure that was the smartest decision?" The average man reacts instantly. He begins explaining his reasoning. He lists his logic. He tries to prove his intelligence. But in doing so, he has already accepted the manipulator's frame, that his decisions require validation. The powerful man answers differently. He may simply say, "Yes," nothing more, no explanation, no defense. The conversation stops moving forward. The manipulator expected emotional energy. Instead, he encounters a wall, and walls cannot be steered. This is the principle Machiavelli described when he warned leaders against appearing defensive. Defensiveness signals vulnerability. It signals that your internal certainty can be shaken by external opinion. Manipulators feed on that signal. They test you repeatedly until they find the crack. But when they encounter a man who is psychologically grounded, the tests become pointless. Because nothing sticks. You cannot guilt him easily. You cannot pressure him easily. You cannot provoke him easily. This forces the manipulator into unfamiliar territory. For the first time, he becomes the one uncertain. And uncertainty destroys manipulation. But the truly powerful understand something even deeper. Manipulators are rarely strategic geniuses. They are opportunists. They test many people, looking for those who respond emotionally. Once they find someone reactive, they invest more effort. But if the first few attempts produce no reaction, they move on. Why waste energy on someone who cannot be controlled? This is why Machiavellian awareness is so powerful. You do not need to defeat manipulators dramatically. You simply make yourself an unattractive target. Think about predators in the wild. They rarely attack the strongest animal in the herd. They search for the distracted, the weak, the separated. Manipulators do the same. They observe who reacts quickly to criticism. They observe who seeks approval. They observe who becomes defensive under pressure. Those individuals become the targets. But the man who remains calm, composed, and psychologically distant becomes invisible to manipulation. He is not interesting to control. He is not easy to provoke. He is not easy to guilt. He is not easy to influence. So the manipulator looks elsewhere. This is the quiet power of psychological sovereignty. You are not constantly fighting battles. You are simply refusing to enter the battlefield. Machiavelli understood that the greatest victories are often invisible. The strongest rulers prevented conspiracies not by crushing them after they formed, but by making conspiracies impossible to organize in the first place. The same strategy applies to manipulation. When your emotional reactions are disciplined, manipulators cannot build momentum against you. They try once, they test again, and when nothing moves, they leave. But there is another layer to this philosophy that most people overlook. Sometimes manipulators do not want control. They want chaos. They provoke arguments, misunderstandings, and emotional tension simply to create instability. This is especially common in workplaces, social groups, and even relationships. The manipulator creates conflict between people. He spreads doubt. He plants small seeds of resentment. Then he watches the chaos grow. And while everyone else argues and defends themselves, he quietly positions himself as the calm observer. Machiavelli saw this tactic used frequently in political courts. A clever courtier could destabilize rivals simply by encouraging misunderstandings between them. And, the moment chaos spreads, those who appear calm gain influence. This is why powerful people refuse to participate in unnecessary drama. They do not gossip. They do not react to rumors. They do not jump into emotional conflicts. Instead, they remain composed while others lose control. And in every social structure, the calmest person in the room eventually becomes the most trusted. Because stability attracts authority. Manipulators cannot survive in stable environments. They require emotional turbulence to operate. When conversations remain calm, when reactions remain measured, when decisions remain rational, manipulation suffocates. This is why Machiavelli valued emotional discipline above almost every other trait. A disciplined mind is extremely difficult to destabilize, and a man who cannot be destabilized cannot be controlled. But there is one final truth that separates powerful people from everyone else. They understand that manipulation often begins long before the first conversation. It begins with access. And controlling access is the final defense against those who seek to influence your mind. Powerful people understand something that most men learn too late. Manipulation rarely begins with words. It begins with access. Before someone can influence your thinking, before they can pressure your emotions, before they can twist your perception of reality, they must first gain entry into your mental space. They must be close enough to speak into your life, close enough to observe you, close enough to shape your reactions. And this is where most men make their greatest mistake. They allow almost anyone access. They allow anyone into their conversations, anyone into their attention, anyone into their emotional world. They answer every message, entertain every opinion, tolerate every critic, and listen to voices that have done nothing to earn the right to be heard. Then they wonder why their minds feel crowded, why their decisions feel uncertain, why their confidence feels fragile. Machiavelli warned leaders about this long before the modern world existed. A prince who allowed too many advisors into his ear would eventually lose control of his own judgment. The more voices surrounding him, the easier it became for someone to influence his thinking, because influence thrives in proximity. The closer someone is to your attention, the easier it becomes for them to shape your perception. This is why powerful people control access with ruthless precision. Not everyone deserves your attention. Not everyone deserves your explanations. Not everyone deserves your presence. The average man lives with an open gate. Anyone can walk in, speak their opinion, challenge his direction, question his decisions, and pull his mind in 100 different directions. But the powerful man builds walls, not walls of arrogance, walls of selectivity. He understands that attention is the most valuable currency he possesses, and he spends it carefully. Some people receive very little of it, some receive none at all. This single discipline eliminates most manipulation before it even approaches him. Because manipulators require time, they require conversation, they require opportunities to plant ideas, create doubt, and test emotional reactions. But when access is limited, those opportunities disappear. The manipulator cannot influence a mind he cannot reach. This is why the most powerful people in any environment often appear distant, not unfriendly, not hostile, simply selective. They speak less, they reveal less. They listen carefully, but they do not invite everyone into their inner world. This creates something extremely important: psychological boundaries. Boundaries are invisible lines that determine how much influence another person can have over you. Without boundaries, people can step directly into your mental territory. They can question your decisions, criticize your direction, pressure your emotions, and slowly reshape your thinking. But when boundaries exist, those attempts stop at the gate. The powerful man does not argue with every opinion, because not every opinion is allowed to matter. He does not defend every accusation, because not every accusation deserves recognition. He does not absorb every emotional pressure, because not every person has the authority to apply it. Most manipulation fails immediately when it encounters strong boundaries, because manipulation depends on blurred lines. It depends on confusion about who holds authority in the interaction. When your boundaries are clear, that confusion disappears. People immediately sense that certain tactics will not work on you, and they adjust their behavior accordingly. This is the final layer of Machiavellian immunity. Awareness prevents you from stepping into traps. Composure prevents you from reacting emotionally. Boundaries prevent manipulators from getting close enough to try. When all three exist together, manipulation collapses before it can form. You do not need to fight psychological battles every day. You simply become a man who cannot be easily influenced. And something remarkable happens when you reach this point. People stop trying. The critics lose interest because they cannot provoke you. The manipulators lose interest because they cannot steer you. The energy vampires lose interest because they cannot drain you. They move on to easier targets. And suddenly the noise around your life begins to disappear. Conversations become clearer. Decisions become calmer. Your mind becomes quieter. This is what Machiavelli understood better than almost anyone in history. True power is not the ability to dominate others. True power is the ability to remain untouched by those who seek to control you. When manipulation cannot reach you, your mind becomes sovereign territory. No one steers your emotions. No one hijacks your decisions. No one shapes your direction without your permission. And from that place of sovereignty, something else begins to emerge. Authority. Not forced authority. Natural authority. The kind that appears when people sense that your mind cannot be easily influenced. They recognize that your decisions are your own. Your direction is your own. Your reactions are under your control. And whether they understand it consciously or not, they begin to respect it. This is how powerful people end manipulation before it starts. Not through confrontation, not through arguments, but through discipline, awareness, and control over access. They guard their attention like a fortress. They control their reactions like a master. And they choose carefully who is allowed into the kingdom of their mind. Because once you master that kingdom, no one else can rule it. Before you leave, remember this. Most men will hear these ideas, nod their heads, and then go right back to reacting to every insult, every opinion, every emotional trap thrown at them. They will keep giving their attention away like loose coins on the street, but a small percentage of men will do something different. They will practice silence. They will guard their attention. They will become impossible to manipulate. If you are one of those men, if you are here to master power, discipline, and the psychology most people never understand, then subscribe to the channel now. Because the next lesson will take you even deeper into the strategies Machiavelli used to build men who cannot be controlled. And once you learn them, the world will never influence you the same way again.